My twin brother's wife gave away their daughter right after birth. And when I found out I was the real father, it annihilated everyone involved. I found the adoption papers in Kyle's desk drawer while looking for his spare car keys. Not snooping, just borrowing like we'd always done, identical twins who'd shared everything since the womb. But the manila folder tucked behind old tax returns might as well have been a bomb with my name on the timer. Private adoption decree. Baby girl Whitmore, born May 14th, 2019. I read it 3 times before my hands started shaking. Kyle and Vanessa never mentioned having a daughter. Never mentioned a pregnancy. In 6 years of marriage, through countless family dinners and holiday gatherings, through my divorce and mom's cancer and dad's retirement party, they'd somehow hidden an entire human being. My niece. Given away like an unwanted gift, and I'd never known she existed until this moment, standing in their empty house on a Saturday afternoon, holding evidence of a secret that made my skin crawl with wrongness I couldn't yet name. The date glowed like an accusation. May 14th, 2019. I counted backward 9 months, landing in August 2018, that summer. The summer Kyle and Vanessa went through their rough patch, and Kyle moved into my apartment for 3 weeks. The summer Vanessa called me crying at 2 a.m., begging me to talk sense into him, to remind him what their vows meant. The summer I drove over there in my boxers and a t-shirt, furious at my brother for hurting her, finding her on the couch in pajama shorts and one of Kyle's old college sweatshirts, mascara tracking down her cheeks. A bottle of wine already half empty on the coffee table. We talked for hours. She kept refilling my glass. She was so broken, so vulnerable, and I was so angry at Kyle for being too stubborn to see what he had. When she kissed me, I kissed back. When she pulled me toward the bedroom, I followed. I told myself I was comforting her. I told myself it was the alcohol. I told myself a lot of things that night that stopped being true the moment I woke up naked in my brother's bed, Vanessa's head on my chest, sunlight streaming through curtains I recognized from helping them move in 2 years earlier. We never spoke about it again. Kyle came home the next week. They reconciled, and Vanessa looked through me at Thanksgiving like I was a stranger. I convinced myself it had been a drunken mistake. A moment of weakness we'd both regretted and erased. But now, staring at adoption papers dated 9 months after that night, the math assembled itself into something monstrous. The baby's birth date pointed backward to a conception window that aligned perfectly with the one night I'd betrayed my identical twin in the worst possible way. My stomach lurched. The folder slipped from my hands, papers scattering across Kyle's desk like evidence at a crime scene. I grabbed my phone, pulled up Vanessa's contact, and typed 4 words before deleting them. Then 5. Then 7. Nothing felt adequate for what I needed to ask. Did you give away my daughter? Did you let your husband think he'd gotten you pregnant? Did you destroy evidence of what we did by erasing the child who resulted from it? I called Kyle instead. He answered on the second ring, his voice bright with the casual ease of someone whose world wasn't currently imploding. Hey man, what's up? You still need those keys? I looked at the adoption papers on his desk, at the signature line where Kyle Whitmore was written in his distinctive chicken scratch handwriting next to Vanessa Whitmore in her careful cursive. Why didn't you tell me? I said. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, tell you what. His voice had changed, gone flat, defensive. About the baby. About your daughter. About giving her up for adoption. Another long pause. When he spoke again, his words came slowly, like he was picking through a minefield. Were you going through our stuff? What the hell, Grant? The use of my name instead of a casual dude or bro told me everything. This was serious. This was a wound. I was looking for your spare keys. The folder was right there in your desk drawer. Kyle, you had a daughter. Vanessa had a baby. Why wouldn't you tell anyone? He exhaled hard enough that I heard it crackle through the phone speaker. Because it wasn't anyone's business. Because it was the hardest decision we ever made, and we didn't need mom and dad and everyone else weighing in with their opinions. Because Vanessa couldn't handle questions about it. Because we wanted to move on. His voice cracked on the last word. She was born premature, Grant. 28 weeks. Vanessa had complications. Preeclampsia, an emergency C-section. The baby was in the NICU for 2 months. The doctor said she might have developmental delays, might need surgeries, might need lifelong care. We weren't ready. We'd been married less than a year. Vanessa was barely holding herself together. The adoption agency said they had a family ready, a family who could give her everything we couldn't. We made the best choice we could with the information we had. Every word sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced this speech in the mirror, preparing for a confrontation he'd known would come eventually. But something rang false. The dates were wrong. The premature birth didn't explain why Vanessa had hidden her pregnancy entirely. When did you find out she was pregnant? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Kyle hesitated. December, Christmas Eve, actually. She took a test at my parents' house, started crying in the bathroom. We hadn't been trying. It was a surprise. December. 4 months after that August night. Long enough for her to know. To suspect, to piece together the same terrible math I was currently calculating. And you never questioned whether the baby was yours? The words tumbled out before I could stop them, sharp and accusing. The silence that followed was different, heavier, darker. What the fuck kind of question is that? Kyle's voice had gone dangerous. Are you seriously asking if my wife cheated on me? Jesus Christ, Grant. We went through hell with that pregnancy, with that decision, and now you're going to stand there and accuse Vanessa of… What exactly are you saying? I couldn't say it. Couldn't tell him that I'd slept with his wife, that the baby might have been mine, that every comforting word I'd offered him during those 3 weeks he'd crashed at my place had been poisoned with guilt and lies. Nothing. I'm not saying anything. I'm just surprised you kept this from everyone. I grabbed the papers, my hands shaking. I'm sorry I brought it up. You're right, it's not my business. Kyle made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Little late for that. Look, Vanessa and I worked hard to put this behind us. It almost destroyed our marriage. Some days I still see her staring at nothing, and I know she's thinking about it, wondering if we made the right choice. Don't dig this up. Don't make us relive it. Just put the papers back and pretend you never saw them. But I couldn't, because one detail on the adoption decree had caught my eye. The name of the agency. Tender Hearts Adoption Services. I'd seen that name before, scrolling through my bank statements during my divorce when my lawyer wanted documentation of every expense. A charge for $300 in September 2018, a month after the night with Vanessa, labeled THAD Services Consultation Fee. I'd called the bank at the time, assuming it was fraud, but the customer service rep confirmed I'd made the charge in person. I'd been confused, but let it drop, chalking it up to some forgotten errand in the chaos of my separation. Now that charge assembled itself into something sinister. Vanessa had used my credit card, had taken it from my wallet that night while I slept, had visited an adoption agency in my name, had started the paperwork before she'd even confirmed the pregnancy. She'd known. From the beginning, she'd known the baby might not be Kyle's, and she'd prepared for that possibility like someone planning a murder, methodically, carefully, covering every angle. I hung up on Kyle without saying goodbye and pulled up Tender Hearts Adoption Services on my phone. The website was clean, professional, full of smiling families and hopeful rhetoric about matching children with their forever homes. I clicked through to their FAQ section, looking for information about private adoptions. The process typically took 6 to 12 months. Contact with birth parents could be arranged through the agency. All adoptions in our state were semi-open, meaning adoptive families received basic information about biological parents, and birth parents could request updates about the child's welfare. I called the agency. A woman with a warm, practiced voice answered, "Tender Hearts Adoption Services, this is Patricia speaking. How may I help you?" My throat felt tight. I'm calling about a private adoption that was finalized in 2019. Baby girl, born in May. I think I might be the biological father, and I was never notified about the adoption process. I didn't consent to giving up my parental rights. Patricia's warmth evaporated. "Sir, I'll need to verify your identity and review our records before discussing any specific case. Can you provide the names of the birth parents on record?" I gave her Kyle and Vanessa's names, then added, "But I'm Grant Whitmore. I'm Kyle's identical twin. I believe Vanessa may have concealed my paternity and listed Kyle as the father on all the paperwork." The silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then, "Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to need you to come into our office. What you're describing represents a serious irregularity." "Can you be here at 3 o'clock today?" The agency occupied a renovated Victorian house on Maple Street, all cheerful yellow paint and white trim that seemed designed to project warmth and trust. Patricia met me in the lobby, 50s, gray hair in a neat bun, kind eyes that had probably witnessed countless emotional meetings. She led me to a small conference room and closed the door. "Mr. Whitmore, before we go any further, I need to be very clear about something. If what you're alleging is true, if your sister-in-law fraudulently represented your brother as the biological father in order to proceed with an adoption without your knowledge or consent, this isn't just an ethical violation. It's potentially criminal. Adoption fraud is a serious matter. It means a child was placed with a family under false pretenses. It means you were denied your parental rights. It means the adoptive parents may not have received accurate medical history. Do you understand the gravity of what you're claiming?" I nodded, my mouth dry. "I need to know if she's mine. I need to see the records. I need to understand what happened." Patricia opened a thick file folder, scanning through pages with the efficiency of someone who'd memorized the contents long ago. The initial consultation was in September 2018. A woman identifying herself as Vanessa Whitmore came alone. She indicated she was recently pregnant, but expressed concerns about the paternity. She stated her husband had been unfaithful during their separation, and she'd also had a brief encounter with someone else during that time. She wanted to explore private adoption options if the baby turned out not to be her husband's. Patricia looked up at me, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp with assessment. She paid the consultation fee with a credit card that wasn't in her name. When I questioned this, she said it belonged to the man she'd had the encounter with, She said he'd given her permission to use it for medical expenses if needed. I should have flagged that as unusual. I didn't. My stomach twisted. What happened next? Patricia flipped through more pages. She came back in December, this time with Kyle Whitmore. They both signed preliminary paperwork indicating their intention to pursue private adoption. They provided medical history, Kyle's family history, Vanessa's family history. Nothing about an alternative biological father? Did they do paternity testing? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's expression darkened. No, they didn't. And that's where this gets complicated. In cases where paternity is questioned, we recommend testing before finalizing adoption. It protects everyone involved, the birth parents, the adoptive family, and most importantly, the child. But testing isn't legally required if both parties listed as birth parents sign the relinquishment papers. Kyle and Vanessa both signed. They both appeared in person. They both seemed certain of their decision. By all appearances, this was a straightforward voluntary adoption by a married couple who decided they couldn't raise the child. She closed the folder with a soft thud. But if you're telling me that you, not Kyle, are the biological father, and that Vanessa concealed this fact deliberately, then she committed fraud. She deceived everyone. This agency, the adoptive family, you, and possibly even your brother. The adoption could potentially be challenged. The child could be removed from her home and placed with you as the biological parent. Do you understand what you're opening up here? The room felt too small, the air too thick. Where is she? Where's my daughter? Patricia shook her head. I can't disclose that information without a court order. But I can tell you this. She's in a good home. The family who adopted her are educated, financially stable, married for 15 years before the adoption. They have 2 other children, both older, who were thrilled to have a baby sister. They've sent us updates every year as required by the semi-open agreement. The child is healthy, meeting all her developmental milestones. She's loved. She's thriving. You need to think very carefully about whether disrupting her life serves anyone's best interests. I thought about the little girl who shared my DNA, growing up with another man's last name, calling strangers mommy and daddy, never knowing I existed. I thought about Kyle, who'd raised no red flags about paternity because he'd never suspected betrayal. I thought about Vanessa, who'd orchestrated this entire deception with the cold precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I want a paternity test, I said. I want to know for certain, and then I want to meet her. Patricia pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. This is my personal attorney. She specializes in adoption law and parental rights. You're going to need her, because what comes next is going to get very ugly, very fast. She stood, her expression softening slightly. For what it's worth, Mr. Whitmore, I believe you. I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've seen every kind of adoption situation imaginable, but I've never seen someone fake a consultation fee with someone else's credit card unless they were setting up a deception. Vanessa knew. She knew from the beginning that this baby might not be Kyle's, and she chose to hide that fact from everyone who should have been informed. That's not the action of someone making a hard choice in good faith. That's the action of someone covering up a crime. I took the card with numb fingers. What happens to the adoptive family if the adoption is overturned? Patricia's expression went carefully blank. They lose a child they've loved as their own for 6 years. They experience trauma and grief. They potentially face legal consequences if it's determined they should have known something was amiss. Their other children lose their sister. It destroys families, Mr. Whitmore, all the way around. No one wins in these situations. No one. I drove to Vanessa and Kyle's house in a fog of rage and disbelief, Patricia's words echoing in my skull. Kyle's truck sat in the driveway. He'd beaten me back after our phone call. I parked on the street and sat there for 10 minutes, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. But all I could see was Vanessa's face that night 6 years ago, streaked with tears, telling me she loved Kyle but didn't know if she could forgive him. All I could hear was my own voice assuring her that Kyle was a good man, that he'd come around, that their marriage was worth fighting for. Had any of it been real? Or had she targeted me deliberately, knowing Kyle and I were genetically identical, knowing she could use me as a paternity smokescreen if she got pregnant? The thought made me sick. I'd been so sure she was the victim that night, so convinced I was helping her through a crisis. But maybe I'd been the mark all along. Maybe she'd orchestrated the whole thing, the wine, the tears, the vulnerability, knowing I'd be too guilt-ridden to ever mention it, too protective of my brother to cause trouble. I walked to the front door and knocked, instead of using the spare key still in my pocket. Kyle opened it, his face already set in hard lines. You're not welcome here right now, Grant. I told you to drop this. I pushed past him into the living room, where Vanessa sat on the couch, the same couch where we'd sat that night, her face pale and expression carefully neutral. Tell him, I said, looking directly at her. Tell him what really happened. Tell him whose baby it was. Kyle moved between us, his body language protective. What the hell are you talking about? Grant, if this is some kind of breakdown? August 2018, I interrupted, my voice shaking. 3 weeks into your separation. Vanessa called me at 2 a.m. crying, asking me to come over. I did. We drank wine. We talked about your marriage, and then we had sex. One time, one night, and 9 months later, she gave birth to a baby she immediately gave up for adoption because she fucking knew, that baby might be mine instead of yours. The color drained from Kyle's face. He turned to Vanessa with an expression I'd never seen on my identical twin's features. Betrayal so profound, it looked like physical pain. Vanessa? Her voice came out surprisingly steady. He's lying. He's had feelings for me for years, everyone knows it. He's making this up because he's jealous that we worked things out and he's still alone. Kyle, you can't believe him. You can't believe I would do that to you. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed Kyle the transaction from September 2018. She used my credit card to pay for an adoption consultation, a month after we slept together, before she even told you she was pregnant. She was planning this from the beginning. Kyle grabbed the phone, staring at the screen. His hands started shaking. Vanessa, tell me this isn't true. Tell me Grant is making this up. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. I didn't use his card. I don't know where he's getting this from. Kyle, please. I went to the adoption agency today, I continued, relentless now, everything pouring out in a rush. Patricia, the woman who handled your case, remembers you coming in alone that first time. She remembers you saying you were concerned about paternity. She remembers you paying with a card that wasn't in your name. She said you told her it belonged to the man you'd had an encounter with. She has it all documented, Vanessa. Every lie you told is in a file at that office, with dates and signatures and evidence. Vanessa's composure cracked. Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Kyle had left me. You came over. We made a mistake. And then I was pregnant, and I didn't know whose baby it was, and I panicked. I thought if I could make it go away, we could all move on. No one had to know. The baby would have a good home. Kyle and I could fix our marriage. You could move on with your divorce. Everyone would be okay. Kyle backed away from her like she'd grown fangs. You let me sign those adoption papers. You let me believe I was giving up my own daughter. You let me live with that guilt for 6 years. Jesus Christ, Vanessa. Who are you? She reached for him, but he flinched away. Kyle, please. I love you. I've always loved you. That night with Grant meant nothing. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But our marriage, everything we've built, that's real. That matters. The baby was better off with the family who adopted her. You said yourself we made the right choice. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed! Kyle's voice cracked on a shout. You cheated on me with my identical twin. You got pregnant and hid the paternity from everyone. You committed fraud to cover it up. And you let me believe for 6 years that I'd abandoned my own child because I wasn't strong enough to be a father. Do you have any idea what that's done to me? The guilt, the shame? I see babies at the grocery store and I want to die because I think about the daughter I gave away. And now you're telling me she might not even be mine? He turned to me, his face twisted with anguish. You should have told me. That night happened. You should have fucking told me. I had no defense. He was right. I know. I'm sorry. I convinced myself it was a one-time mistake that didn't matter. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about the baby until today. Kyle laughed, a broken sound that hurt to hear. You didn't know? She didn't tell you. How convenient for both of you. He grabbed his keys from the counter, his movements sharp and jerky. I need to get out of here. I need to think. I can't look at either of you right now. He slammed out of the house, his truck roaring to life seconds later. Vanessa and I stood in the echoing silence, separated by 6 feet and 6 years of lies. You need to do a paternity test, I said quietly. You need to find out the truth. She wiped her eyes, her expression hardening. Why? So you can play hero? So you can swoop in and claim a daughter you never wanted? You didn't want her that night, Grant. You didn't want me. You crept out of here at dawn like you'd done something shameful, and you never looked back. Don't pretend you care about this baby now. Don't pretend you're doing this for noble reasons. You're doing this because you're angry at me, because you want revenge, because you need something to make yourself feel important. The accuracy of her words hit like a slap. Maybe, but she's still a child who deserves to know the truth about where she came from, and if she's mine, she deserves better than being raised by strangers while her biological father is alive and willing. Vanessa moved to the door, opening it in clear dismissal. Get out. Get a lawyer if you want. Demand a paternity test. Blow up our lives. But know this. Whatever happens, you're not the hero of this story. You're just another man who couldn't keep his dick in his pants, and now you want to make that everyone else's problem. I left, her words chasing me to my car. She was right, about all of it. I'd made choices that night, selfish choices, cowardly choices, and now a child I'd never met was paying the price for them. But I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when I knew she existed, knew she might be mine, knew Vanessa had erased her from our lives like she was an inconvenient problem to be solved. I called Patricia's attorney from my car, leaving a voicemail that probably sounded unhinged. Then I called my own lawyer from the divorce, explaining the situation in halting sentences that made me sound insane. She listened in silence, then said, "Grant, this is going to be expensive, emotionally devastating, and might end with you losing anyway. Are you sure you want to do this?" I thought about a 6-year-old girl who looked like me, who had my genes, my blood, growing up without knowing I existed. Yes, I'm sure. The legal machinery ground forward with agonizing slowness. Patricia provided sworn testimony about Vanessa's initial consultation, including the detail about the credit card charge. The adoption agency's records confirmed every element of my story: dates, statements, inconsistencies. My lawyer filed a motion to compel paternity testing, arguing that fraud invalidated the adoption decree. Kyle filed for divorce, citing adultery and fraud. Vanessa hired a defense attorney who painted me as an obsessed stalker, making wild accusations to insert myself into a settled family situation. The judge assigned to the case was a woman in her 60s named Carolyn Fitzgerald, known for her no-nonsense approach to family law. She ordered paternity testing for all 3 of us, me, Kyle, and the little girl currently living with her adoptive family. She also ordered a guardian ad litem to represent the child's interests, separate from the adoptive parent's attorney. The motion hearing was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, my life collapsed like a house of cards in a strong wind. Mom called me crying, demanding to know why I'd slept with my brother's wife and hidden it for years. Dad stopped answering my calls entirely. My sister Lindsay sent a text that said simply, "How could you?" Kyle blocked my number, changed his locks, and moved out of the house he'd shared with Vanessa, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her lies. I saw him once, accidentally, at a coffee shop near his office. He looked like he'd aged a decade, gaunt, hollow-eyed, moving through the world like a ghost. When our eyes met across the crowded shop, he turned and walked out without acknowledging me. Identical twins, people always said, meant sharing everything. We'd shared a womb, a face, a childhood, a history. Now we shared a betrayal so profound, I didn't know if we'd ever share anything again. The paternity test required a cheek swab from me, a cheek swab from Kyle, and a cheek swab from the little girl. The guardian ad litem arranged for the child's sample to be collected without revealing why, telling her it was a routine medical test. I asked if I could see her just once, even from a distance. The answer was a firm no. Not until the results came back. Not until the court decided what served her best interests. The wait was excruciating. I threw myself into work, spending 14-hour days at the architectural firm where I'd been a junior partner for 3 years, designing buildings I'd never see completed, losing myself in blueprints and zoning regulations and structural calculations. My colleagues whispered when I walked by. Someone had leaked the story to a local blogger who specialized in scandal, and suddenly my personal catastrophe was public entertainment. Local architect claims paternity of niece given up for adoption. Twin brother's wife accused of fraud. The comments section was predictably vicious. Half the readers called me a homewrecker. The other half called Vanessa a monster. No one seemed to consider that we might both be terrible people who'd destroyed an innocent child's life with our selfish choices. I started drinking too much, showing up at work with hangovers, snapping at subordinates, missing deadlines. My senior partner pulled me into his office and suggested I take a leave of absence until my personal situation resolved itself. Translation: You're a liability, and we can't afford the association. The paternity results came back on a Friday afternoon in November. My lawyer called at 3:47 p.m., her voice carefully neutral. "Grant, we have the results. You need to sit down." I was already sitting in my empty apartment, staring at the wall where photos of Kyle and me as kids used to hang before I'd taken them down in a fit of self-loathing. "Tell me." She took a breath. "You're the biological father. The probability is 99.97%. Kyle is excluded as the biological father. Vanessa's testimony about paternity uncertainty was accurate. The child is yours." The room tilted. I'd known, logically, that this was likely. The timeline made sense. The evidence pointed one direction, but hearing it stated as scientific fact, "You're the father, this child is yours," hit differently than suspicion. I had a daughter, a 6-year-old daughter who didn't know I existed, who'd been given away because her mother couldn't face the truth of her conception. What happens now? My voice sounded strange, detached. Judge Fitzgerald scheduled an emergency hearing for Monday morning. All parties required to attend, including the adoptive parents. This is where things get complicated, Grant. The state has an interest in preserving stable family placements. The adoptive parents have done nothing wrong. They believed they were adopting a child whose birth parents had voluntarily relinquished rights. The child has bonded with them for 6 years. Overturning the adoption would be traumatic for her. "But it was fraud," I said, anger rising. "Vanessa lied. She put Kyle's name on the birth certificate when she knew he might not be the father. She denied me my parental rights. Doesn't that matter?" My lawyer sighed. "It matters. But the court's primary concern is the child's welfare, not punishing Vanessa or vindicating you. You'll have a chance to present your case, to argue that you deserve the opportunity to parent your biological daughter. but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the judge decides leaving her with her adoptive family is in her best interests, regardless of how she got there. The law doesn't always deliver the justice we think we deserve. I hung up and sat in the dark as evening fell, thinking about a little girl whose name I didn't even know. My daughter. The words felt foreign, impossible. I'd never wanted children, had been relieved when my ex-wife and I never got pregnant during our brief marriage. But that was abstract. The idea of children, someday, maybe. This was concrete, specific. A 6-year-old girl who liked purple and unicorns, according to the Guardian ad litem's report. Who played soccer and took piano lessons. Who had 2 older brothers who adored her. Who called another man dad and had never heard my name. Monday morning, the courthouse was cold and formal, all marble and echoing footsteps. My lawyer met me outside the courtroom, briefing me in hushed tones. The adoptive parents are here, Richard and Susan Caldwell. I flinched. That name was on the forbidden list. My lawyer noticed. Sorry, did I say something wrong? I shook my head. No. Continue. She gave me an odd look, but pressed on. They're devastated. They've hired a top family law attorney. They're arguing that overturning the adoption now would cause irreparable harm to their daughter. Yes, they're calling her their daughter, and that your rights were properly terminated through the legal process, even if fraud was involved. They're asking the court to uphold the adoption and deny your petition for custody. I felt sick. They knew. They had to know something was wrong. Vanessa concealed paternity concerns, didn't do testing. They didn't know, my lawyer interrupted. The adoption agency didn't tell them about Vanessa's initial consultation. They received standard disclosure about the birth parents, medical history, basic background. Nothing raised red flags. There are victims here too, Grant. They've raised a child for 6 years who might now be taken from them because someone else lied. The courtroom doors opened. We filed inside, taking seats on opposite sides of the gallery like opposing armies preparing for battle. Kyle sat alone, several rows behind Vanessa and her attorney. Our eyes met briefly, his filled with such hatred that I had to look away. Vanessa looked small, diminished, her expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight. The adoptive parents sat with their attorney, a woman who'd probably cost them their life savings. And between them all sat the Guardian ad litem, a man named Roger Stevens who'd spent 6 weeks interviewing everyone involved, preparing a report for the judge that would likely determine my daughter's fate. Judge Fitzgerald entered, and we all rose. She was smaller than I'd imagined, but her presence filled the courtroom. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and looked at us with an expression that suggested she'd seen every variation of human failing, and found all of it tedious. This is a contested adoption case involving allegations of fraud and paternity misrepresentation, she began, her voice crisp. I've reviewed all submitted materials, including the paternity test results, the Guardian ad litem's report, testimony from the adoption agency, and statements from all parties. This is a preliminary hearing to determine how to proceed. Mr. Whitmore, she looked at me. Your attorney has filed a motion to overturn the adoption decree and award you custody as the biological father. Is that correct? I stood, my legs shaky. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Fitzgerald turned to the adoptive parents. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. I relaxed slightly. Not Caldwell, after all. Different people. You're opposing this motion and seeking to maintain the adoption as finalized. Is that correct? Richard Harrison stood. He was mid-50s, graying hair, kind face creased with worry. Yes, Your Honor. Our daughter, Lily. Lily. Her name was Lily. Has been our daughter for 6 years. We've raised her from infancy. She knows no other family. Overturning the adoption now would be devastating to her. We understand Mr. Whitmore's position, but we don't believe uprooting a child from the only home she's known serves justice or her welfare. Judge Fitzgerald nodded and turned to Vanessa. Mrs. Whitmore, you're the common thread here. Your actions set all of this in motion. Do you have anything to say before I hear from the Guardian ad litem? Vanessa stood slowly, her voice barely audible. I made terrible choices. I hurt everyone in this room. I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted to say I'm sorry. To Kyle, to Grant, to Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, and to Lily. I'm so sorry. Judge Fitzgerald's expression didn't soften. Your apology is noted. Mr. Stevens, please present your findings. The Guardian ad litem stood, consulting a tablet. Your Honor, I've spent considerable time evaluating what arrangement serves Lily's best interests. I've interviewed the Harrisons, observed Lily in their home, reviewed their financial and emotional fitness as parents. They're exemplary caregivers. Lily is thriving in their care, socially, academically, emotionally. She has strong bonds with her adoptive brothers, is active in her school and community, and shows no signs of trauma or neglect. Removing her from this environment would cause significant psychological harm. He paused, flipping through screens. However, I've also interviewed Mr. Grant Whitmore. He's expressed genuine desire to know his daughter, to be part of her life. He's financially stable, employed, has no criminal history, and by all accounts would be a capable parent. His rights were terminated through fraud. His sister-in-law deliberately concealed his paternity to facilitate an adoption he never consented to. The law provides remedies in these situations precisely because we recognize that parental rights are fundamental. Roger Stevens looked up at the judge. My recommendation is unconventional, but I believe it serves Lily's best interests while also acknowledging Mr. Whitmore's rights. I propose a hybrid arrangement. The adoption remains in place with the Harrisons as Lily's legal parents, but Mr. Whitmore is granted visitation rights as her biological father, with the framework similar to what we'd order in a parental alienation case. Gradual introduction, supervised visits initially, building toward regular contact. Lily deserves to know her biological father. Mr. Whitmore deserves the opportunity to be part of her life. The Harrisons deserve to maintain the family they've built. This arrangement attempts to honor all of those interests. The courtroom erupted in whispered conversations. Judge Fitzgerald banged her gavel once, sharply. Order. Mr. Whitmore, what's your response to this recommendation? I stood again, my mouth dry. Your Honor, I appreciate Mr. Stevens's thoughtfulness, but I'm her father, not a visitor, not a distant relative. Her father. I should have the opportunity to raise her, to be her primary parent. The Harrisons seem like good people, but they're strangers who benefited from fraud. Why should they get to keep my daughter while I'm relegated to occasional visits? Judge Fitzgerald's expression hardened. Because Mr. Whitmore, you forfeited your moral high ground when you slept with your brother's wife and said nothing about it for 6 years. Because you didn't even know this child existed until a few months ago, and your sudden interest in fatherhood coincides conveniently with discovering you'd been wronged. Because tearing a 6-year-old from her home to satisfy your sense of injustice isn't justice, it's cruelty wearing a righteous mask. The words hit like physical blows. You want to be a father? Prove it. Accept the visitation arrangement Mr. Stevens proposed. Build a relationship with Lily gradually, sensitively, in a way that doesn't traumatize her. Show me over the next year that you're committed to her welfare, not just your wounded pride. If you do that, if you demonstrate genuine parental investment, we can revisit custody arrangements when Lily is older and capable of expressing her own preferences. But I will not rip a child from loving parents to hand her to a biological father she's never met, no matter how egregious the fraud that brought us here. She looked at Vanessa with open contempt. As for you, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. Adoption fraud carries serious penalties. You may face fines, restitution, and possibly jail time. That's not my decision to make, but I'll recommend prosecution in my report. The gavel came down. Adoption decree remains in place. Mr. Grant Whitmore is granted supervised visitation rights beginning with 1 hour per week, building toward unsupervised visits over 6 months. The Harrisons will facilitate these visits and ensure Lily receives age-appropriate counseling to process the introduction of her biological father. All parties will reconvene in 1 year for review. Court adjourned. I stood frozen as everyone filed out. Richard Harrison approached me, his expression cautious. Mr. Whitmore, I know this isn't what you hoped for, but Lily is a wonderful child, and I think once you meet her, you'll see why we've fought so hard to keep her. We're not trying to erase you. We just want what's best for her. I wanted to hate him, wanted to see him as the enemy, the man raising my daughter while I'd been kept in the dark. But looking at his tired, worried face, I saw only another person caught in the blast radius of Vanessa's lies. When can I meet her? I asked quietly. Susan Harrison stepped forward, a slight woman with graying blonde hair and eyes that assessed me carefully. We need to prepare her. Tell her about you in a way that doesn't frighten her. Can you give us 2 weeks? 2 weeks? After 6 years, what was 2 more weeks? I nodded. The introduction happened on a Saturday afternoon at a neutral location, a family therapist's office designed to look like a comfortable living room. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Elena Morrison, explained the process while I waited in a separate room, my hands sweating, my heart racing, like I was about to give a presentation to 1,000 people. Lily knows she was adopted. The Harrisons have always been honest with her about that. We've told her that her birth mother asked a nice family to take care of her because she couldn't at the time. Today, we're introducing the concept of her birth father, you, and explaining that you didn't know about her before but want to meet her now. We're keeping it simple, age-appropriate, and we're following her lead. If she seems overwhelmed, we stop. If she wants to leave, she can. This is about her comfort, not yours. Understand? I nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Morrison opened the door to the main room. Lily, there's someone here who'd like to meet you. This is Grant. He's the person we talked about, your birth father. I stepped into the room, and my world tilted sideways. She looked like me. Not resembled, looked like me. The same dark hair, the same sharp chin, the same wide-set hazel eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. She was small for 6, dressed in purple leggings and a unicorn sweatshirt, sitting on a couch next to Susan Harrison with a stuffed animal clutched in her hands. When she looked up at me, I saw my own face reflected back at me in miniature, and the impact of it stole my breath. This was my daughter, my child. The reality of it crashed over me in waves, not abstract anymore, not hypothetical, but concrete and undeniable and sitting 3 feet away, looking at me with curious wariness. "Hi," I managed, my voice rough. "Hi, Lily. It's nice to meet you." She didn't answer, just studied me with those familiar eyes. Dr. Morrison guided me to a chair across from the couch, maintaining distance, keeping things non-threatening. "Lily, do you remember what we talked about earlier? About how sometimes birth fathers don't know about their children right away, and when they find out, they want to meet them?" Lily nodded slowly. "You didn't know about me?" She directed the question at me, her voice high and clear. "No," I said honestly. "I didn't know about you until a few months ago. But as soon as I found out, I wanted to meet you. I wanted to know you." She considered this, turning the stuffed animal over in her hands. "Do you have other kids?" "No. You're my only child." This seemed to interest her. "So, I'm your only daughter?" "Yes. You're my only daughter." She looked at Susan Harrison, seeking reassurance. Susan nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, sweetie. Grant is a friend. He just wants to get to know you a little bit." Lily turned back to me. "Do you like unicorns?" The question was so unexpected, so perfectly childlike, that I nearly laughed. "I don't know much about them, but I'd like to learn. Do you like unicorns?" She nodded seriously. "They're my favorite. I have 17 unicorn toys at home. This one's name is Sparkle." She held up the stuffed animal, a purple unicorn with a silver horn. "She's beautiful," I said. "Does she have magic powers?" Lily's face lit up. "She can fly and grant wishes, and she only eats rainbow candy." For the next 45 minutes, she told me about Sparkle and the other unicorns, about her brothers and her friends at school, about the piano recital she had next month. I listened, asked questions, let her control the conversation. At no point did she call me Dad or suggest any understanding that I might become a regular part of her life. I was just a stranger asking about unicorns, present for an hour before disappearing back into the adult world she didn't fully comprehend. When the session ended, Susan Harrison stood, gathering Lily's coat. "Say goodbye to Grant, Lily." Lily waved, already distracted by whatever was happening next in her busy 6-year-old life. "Bye, Grant. Maybe you can meet my other unicorns next time." "I'd like that," I said, my throat tight. "Thank you for showing me Sparkle." They left, and I sat alone with Dr. Morrison, trying to process what had just happened. "You did well," she said. "That was a positive first meeting. How are you feeling?" How was I feeling? Devastated, grateful, heartbroken, hopeful. Angry that this should have been my life for 6 years but wasn't. Relieved that she seemed happy, well-adjusted, loved. "I don't know," I admitted. "She's perfect, but she's not mine." "Not really, she's theirs." Dr. Morrison's expression was kind but honest. "She's all of yours, in different ways. Biology doesn't erase the family she's built with the Harrisons, and their love doesn't erase your genetic connection. This is the reality you're working with now, a blended, complicated reality that doesn't fit neat categories. Your job is to figure out how to be her father within that reality, not to recreate a fantasy where none of this happened." The visits continued weekly, gradually expanding in duration and comfort. By month 3, Lily would hug me goodbye. By month 6, she asked if I'd come to her piano recital. By month 9, she introduced me to her friends as my birth dad, Grant. It wasn't what I'd imagined fatherhood would look like, but it was something. A connection, fragile and strange. Built week by week in supervised rooms and carefully orchestrated outings. Kyle never spoke to me again. He finalized his divorce from Vanessa, moved to Portland, and cut ties with everyone who reminded him of what he'd lost. I heard through our sister that he was in therapy, trying to rebuild a life that didn't include the brother he'd trusted or the wife who'd betrayed him. Vanessa pled guilty to adoption fraud and received 2 years probation, a $50,000 fine, and 1,000 hours of community service. The DA could have pushed for jail time, but didn't, convinced that public humiliation was punishment enough. She moved to another state, changed her name, and disappeared from our lives like she'd never existed. The Harrisons remained cautious but cordial, recognizing that I wasn't trying to replace them, but simply trying to be present. Richard attended a few of my visits, observing how I interacted with Lily, gradually relaxing his guard as he saw I had no intention of confusing or upsetting her. Susan invited me to Lily's 7th birthday party, a gesture that felt monumental in its generosity. I brought a stuffed unicorn I'd found online, a rare edition, silver with rainbow mane. Lily's face when she opened it was worth every moment of awkwardness and pain the previous year had contained. I rebuilt my career slowly, finding a new firm that hadn't heard about my scandal, starting over with junior projects and long hours. I dated occasionally, but never seriously, unable to shake the feeling that anyone who knew my history would see me as the man who'd betrayed his twin and given up his daughter. Maybe that's who I was. Maybe that's who I'd always be. My daughter knew me now, in her way. She'd never call me Dad. That word belonged to Richard, earned through 6 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and endless patience. But she called me Grant, said it with warmth, looked for me at her recitals and soccer games. It wasn't everything, But it was more than I deserved, more than I'd had a year ago, more than I'd thought possible in the courtroom when Judge Fitzgerald's gavel came down. The one-year review hearing happened on a cold morning in December. Judge Fitzgerald reviewed the reports from Dr. Morrison, statements from the Harrisons, and a letter Lily had dictated to her teacher about my family. The letter mentioned Richard and Susan, her brothers, her friends, her teacher, her grandparents, and at the very end, Grant who comes to visit and brings unicorns. I was an afterthought in her world, a footnote, and somehow that was okay. Judge Fitzgerald looked up from the documents, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Whitmore, you've demonstrated consistency and commitment over the past year. The reports indicate Lily has adjusted well to having you in her life. I'm prepared to continue the visitation arrangement with expanded privileges, overnight visits, holiday access, increased autonomy. However, primary custody will remain with the Harrisons. Is this acceptable to you? I stood, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. She nodded. Then this matter is resolved. I hope all parties can move forward with grace and prioritize this child's well-being above all else. We're adjourned. And just like that, it was over. Not with the explosion I'd expected, not with the justice I'd thought I deserved. Just a quiet ending to a year of chaos, everyone damaged, everyone changed, no one winning entirely. Outside the courthouse, Susan Harrison stopped me. Grant, we're having Christmas at our house this year. Richard's parents, my sister, the boys. We'd like you to come. Not for the whole day, maybe just for dinner. We think Lily would like that. I stared at her, stunned. Are you sure? She smiled, sad but genuine. No, but we're trying. You're part of her life now. That means you're part of ours too. We're all just doing our best here. Christmas Day, I showed up at the Harrisons' house with presents I'd agonized over for weeks, my heart pounding with nervousness. Lily answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. Grant, you came. Come see the tree. She grabbed my hand and pulled me inside, into a home that smelled like cinnamon and pine, where her brothers ran past chasing a dog, where Richard and Susan looked up from the chaos with tentative welcome. I destroyed families with my choices, but maybe, slowly, painfully, we were building something new from the wreckage. Not what any of us planned, not what any of us wanted, but something that might, eventually, be enough. And my daughter, brilliant, happy, loved Lily, would grow up knowing all of her story, all of her people, with more family than most children ever had. In the end, perhaps that was the only justice possible. Not in punishment or vindication, but in a child's laughter echoing through a house full of imperfect people trying their best to love her. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.